Welcome back to day 2 of the 169th meeting of the National Advisory Environmental Health Sciences Council. So we're going to hear a lot today about DEIA efforts. I know that there was interest yesterday, and so we're doing a lot on this front. And we'll be starting off with a presentation by our Deputy Director, Dr. Trevor Archer, who has been doing a lot of the coordination on our end around DEIA, and he will be specifically talking about the REAP. Let me just take this opportunity to apologize. I'm going to have to duck out at about lunch today. I'm going to have to head in and put a little ice on my chin. I had a little surgery this morning, so I'll be on the Zoom this afternoon. Okay, Trevor, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rick, and good morning, everyone. My name is Trevor Archer, and I'm the Deputy Director at NIHS, and so I'd like to use the next 30 to 35 minutes to give you an update on the NIHS Racial and Ethnic Equity Plan, or REAP, which is a UNITE initiative that was begun a little bit more than a year ago. And I thought I would start by giving you a little bit of background and history as to how we got to this process. And so the events in about 2020, brought into sort of sharp relief sort of the ongoing reality of racial injustice in our country, and the responsibility that all of us have to address this. And this is a slide that I took from Marie Bernard's presentation to the advisory committee to the director of the NIH back in July of, I guess almost 2 years ago now. And this recounted the fact that there were a series of really intense discussions among the leadership of NIH as these issues were unfolding. And then they were also informed by a number of self-assembled groups, one called ACRE, 8CRE, 8 Changes for Racial Equality, and a group of senior African-American and Black scientists at NIH. And there was also a meeting with the anti-harassment steering committee that really had some very sort of candid discussions about what next to do. And what happened is that NIH arrived at a shared commitment to address structural racism, and realizing that this was a pivotal moment that we could act and should not let go unacted upon. And the approach that the NIH took was to create what was called is called the UNITE initiative. And each of the letters stand for a particular focus that a group of NIH scientists and staff were involved in. These involved the U Committee, which was attempting to understanding stakeholder experiences through a series of consultations and listening sessions. A committee designated N that was really focused on developing new research ideas in health disparities, minority health, and health equity. This is an area which NIH had deemed important, but realistically had not invested the resources to really affect a significant improvement. The I Committee, which is designed to look at the internal NIH, involving an idea of trying to address issues around the NIH culture, thinking about how we can approach equity, inclusion, and excellence in our science. And I had the privilege, along with Marie Bernard, the Chief Officer for Scientific Workforce Diversity at NIH, and Alfred Johnson, the Deputy Director for Management at NIH, to lead this group. The T Committee represents transparency, and this was a realization by leadership that what was one of the things that was really missing and critical was that there was a feeling that the NIH wasn't transparent or really even accountable for the activities and things that were ongoing. And so this was a decision made to really try to approach more improved communication to both internal and external stakeholders. In the final committee, the E Committee, which is the one that probably overlaps most with the activities of this council, involved looking at the extramural research ecosystem and trying to develop policies and culture changes to provoke workforce diversity. The idea that a more diverse extramural workforce would perhaps better represent the NIH in the country. And so one of the recommendations that came out of the UNITE I Committee was to generate what's called a Racial and Ethnic Equity Plan, or REAP. And this is similar to a mandate on sexual harassment that the NIH engaged in 2018, which is really to try to understand and put in place a set of plan and activities that would address issues around racial and ethnic equity. To do this, we created a guidance committee that was led by Camille Hoover, Stefan Scott, and among others, and then we put together a group of subject matter experts at NIH from across the division of the various institutes that were present, and then partnered with a consulting group led by Bruce Stewart. This is the Small World Consulting Group, and Dr. Stewart comes with a very outstanding pedigree in dealing with issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, having been responsible for the implementation of President Obama's Executive Order 13583, which established a coordinated government-wide initiative to promote diversity and inclusion in the federal workforce, and is also as a chair of the White House Interagency Office on Science and Technology Policy Group aimed at increasing diversity in STEM workforce and reducing implicit bias. It was also aided by Phil Lee, the president of the Results Leadership Group, a longtime consultant at the NIH on areas of equity, workforce development, and improved public service. So very basically, this is the approach that was taken. And so this is the process, which involved three parts, which involved in establishing and preparing and managing this process. And in establishing, it was the understanding that there was a need for a new approach to how we conducted and thought about racial and ethnic equity. Really had to try to adopt what was referred to as a racial and ethnic equity lens, or REAL. And this was a way of looking at the problem that had not been previously utilized at NIH. We then had to prepare this process by developing a leadership commitment. We needed to establish an infrastructure in order to carry this out. And then we really wanted to develop a set of overarching goals that could be widely applicable across the entire NIH. We wanted to then identify focus areas that these goals would address and engage the various stakeholders. And then the next phase was to actually manage this process. And this involved assessing the selected goals and focus areas, designs to identify the causes and select actions. And we wanted to implement the various activities that are ongoing. Finally, we wanted to be able to report on progress. You see at the bottom of the slide in blue, it was a very aggressive timeline at that point to try to get this done. And the decision was made that we would have three overarching goals that all the institutes and centers at NIH would embrace and take activity on. These include applying the racial and equity lens, or REAL framework, to all of NIHS's workforce structures and systems. We then wanted to try to identify and dismantle any racial and ethnic disparities at NIHS's workforce. And then finally, to enhance the diversity of the workforce at NIHS. And again, similar activities were occurring throughout the NIH. An important part of making any process like this function was having the support of leadership. And Dr. Wojcik was very adamant and very clear in his message to the NIHS that he was looking forward to supporting all of these activities and really working to identify and dismantle policies and practices that may harm our workforce and our science. And so this really hit the first issue, was a strong leadership commitment from this. So to do this, we created a NIHS, our REAP team, which consisted of 14 individuals, federal employees and contractors from all 5 of the divisions at NIEHS, including Linda Bass, Michelle Bennett, Allison Eason, Veronica Godfrey-Robinson, Laverne James, Mark Miller, Joan Packingham, Beth Perry, Nicole Popovich, Erica Reed, Carranza Smith, Alexander Torres, and Steve Tuashimi. And so working with this group, we were able to collect information, put together a synthesis of the various activities that were going on at NIEHS, and then try to identify areas of concern. We also partnered with our contractors, Powertrain and Small World Solutions, to gather data through surveys and focus groups. And we also did a workforce cultural equity survey, which collected data from about 341 of our staff members. I'll remind you that Small World Group is the same group that Dr. Stewart manages, and they were the architects of the REAP process. And so we felt really comfortable having them work with us as partners for this process. And so what I'll do next is I'll just take you through these 3 goals and activities that we've been engaged in over the last year and the process. And so the first goal, as I mentioned, is to apply this real framework, to understand our workforce structures and systems. And so the team produced an action plan, which had 3 components. One is to establish a shared IC leadership commitment to the action plan. And I think you saw that actually in the slide I showed earlier from Dr. Wojcik. To create a central message on racial and ethnic equity that's inclusive. Identify and implement key processes, policies, practices, and programs that might significantly impact our ethnic and racial equity at NIHS. So with this, I want to just highlight a couple of things that we are engaged in that we see as successes, which is the first includes efforts to diversify our leadership. And this is by looking at the hiring and promotion practices across the Institute to show that during this period, we've had an increased number of individuals from diverse backgrounds who have been promoted to a GS 13 and higher level at NIHS. We tried to identify and review core competencies for all the positions at NIHS, an effort led through the Office of Management, and using these findings to help improve professional development, succession planning, and our recruitment strategies. We've also made sure that we attempted to develop a recruitment strategy that diversifies our candidate pool, believing that this is really the pathway for diversity by making sure that we give as many individuals and as diverse a group of individuals opportunities to participate in the NIHS activities. The second one is sort of creating a message on racial and ethnic equity. This included multiple institute-wide town halls on DIA that have been led by the senior leadership group. This is an opportunity to both present the activities that are ongoing at the Institute, as well as to engage in a robust question and answer period with our staff so that they can ask any questions, any concerns they have can be brought directly to senior leadership. We've also had some additional training, and by contracting with a number of DIA specialized groups, which gave training to both leadership and staff, as well as developing professional programs that allow us to provide growth opportunities for employees. In 2022, two participants in this leadership process were promoted, and so demonstrating to our staff the path and the success and utility of these kinds of approaches. The third action is to develop key processes, policies, and practices, really to think how we might significantly impact ethnic and racial equity across NIHS. One of these involved partner engagement, and I think you will hear from Dr. Vasquez and the working group that of this council, their ideas and proposals that they have for us later on today. We've also made sure that DEI training for leadership has been a central portion of what activity we've been engaged in. And as Dr. Balshore mentioned yesterday, the outward inclusion and outward leadership program is one that members of the DERT staff have been engaged in over the last couple of years. And finally, we've had a number of DEIA lectures. We have a robust program led by our Office of Science, Education, and Diversity, which brings in a variety of speakers from the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at NIH on various portfolio issues. The second goal was to identify ways to advance racial and ethnic equity within our workforce. And part of this involved three actions that we were involved in. These involved conducting a review of the NIHSP Map Scores. So PMAP is Performance Management Action Plan that all federal employees are engaged in to both sort of describe and promote the effective performance of their various positions. And this is an annual process of review. And over the analysis through the Office of EDI at NIH had demonstrated that there were correlations between these scores, grade levels, that reflected across the NIH that raised issues of concern in terms of how we address equity. We also want to develop plans to educate our workforce about DEIA, and then implement strategies to address any disparities that were apparent or thought to be occurring within our workforce. So again, covered through a few highlights and successes. One of the first things we need to do, and it's an ongoing process, is analyzing our scores in a way that reflects both the personal privacy of the individuals involved, but gets at issues of root causes. And this is something that's ongoing to try to identify any cases where there may be potential inequities. We're really working through working groups of staff and supervisors so that there's a better understanding of this process in terms of what the PMAP does and how the scoring system can be effectively used to promote growth of staff and their development. And then we're also talking about updating and expanding the language in the PMAP. So there's an explicit recognition of the importance of commitments to DEIA and activities in that area. So really, as we mentioned, and I should have said at the beginning, for example, the REAP group that has worked on this process have done this as a volunteer effort. And so really recognizing that contribution that staff makes. So another action is sort of developing education, because again, I think one of the issues that became apparent from surveys of staff is that there's a spectrum of understanding about these issues. And so we really tried to create a series of trainings and seminars, and these included issues such as anti-bullying and anti-racism that were spread between different divisions. An important part of what we do at NIHS is actually the training the next generation of environmental health sciences. And one of the things that has become, I think, really apparent over the last couple of years in respect, particularly through the COVID pandemic, is that young scientists need a degree of nurturing that I think we should have all recognized, but perhaps did not fully embrace. And so by creating a supportive community, in some of these cases, these are self-assembled communities of young trainees that we have at the Institute, provide a way of understanding this process. And then finally, we really have been trying to effectively support our existing Office of Science Education and Diversity, or OSED, which has had a number of programs and activities over the years. The third is development strategies to address any disparities. And so part of this has been involved organizing our staff. And a particular example of this has been in our Division of Intramural Research, where we had, under the charge of the scientific director, 4 groups self-assemble to address the areas indicated on the slides, looking at recruitment, retention, career development, performance evaluation and recognition, and then outreach and engagement. And so this allowed staff to come together on a voluntary basis, to be self-led, organize, and provide recommendations to leadership on how we can address these particular areas. It's also been very important to create bidirectional communication. And a perfect or a really good example of this is occurred in our Division of Translational Toxicology, which created, again, using the NIH penchant for acronyms, the NICE team for Nurturing Interaction for Continued Excellence, which allowed really good communication between staff and leadership to address and have, rather than leadership identify areas, have staff and leadership together identify areas that are going to be important for improving the activities in that division. And then we've also, again, working with, in this case, the example of our Division of Extramural Research and Training, our leadership and teams. We put together a series of meetings for a change action group, which allowed the division to understand issues that were confronting it, and then come together for a shared set of solutions that can be embraced by the entire our group. Okay. The final and third goal that I'll talk about is our efforts to advance diversity in the NIH's workforce. This action plan had 4 major areas, again, and you'll see this sort of recurring effort, which is that we really believe that there should and has to be a leadership commitment to this action plan. We wanted to create a central message on how we would do this, and then again, look at the various processes and policies. And finally, it's been really important, and our staff have let us know this, that it's critical to have transparency. People want to see and understand the activities and the approaches that leadership and staff are taking so that we can understand whether it really reflects the true concerns that are present. And so we did this in part, recognizing that as leaders we needed also training and understanding. And so we had a series of strategic retreats that focused on this issue to allow us to really try to understand staff concerns, craft solutions that could be presented and offered. We then also wanted to take action by having, again, multiple engagements with change agents identified across the divisions to developing these action plans. And then finally, recognizing that, at least certainly speaking for myself, I'm not a subject matter expert, and in fact, a number of us are not. And so we engaged with consultants who could provide information and training that better supported our activities. And so we wanted to create a central message that we had, and this involved, for example, an outreach led by our Office of Scientific Education and Diversity, looking at the number of HBCUs in the North Carolina and related areas that really connected with their staff, their students, to try to make them aware of what we can do and learn the issues and concerns that they wanted to bring to our attention. So really a bi-directional communication and understanding. The Office of Scientific Workforce Diversity at NIH has developed an extensive recruiting tool that allows recruitment across NIH to be much more broadly disseminated and contacting groups in areas that may not normally receive our recruiting requests. And using this tool has been very useful for all of the divisions at the Institute. And finally, we really want to try to understand how do we retain our staff? How do we make sure that they are really motivated to stay? And a really innovative approach by the Office of Management involved creating what they referred to as stay interviews. So of course, we're all very familiar with the idea of an exit interview, but at that point, things are a little bit horse outside of the barn, so to speak, to use a well-used metaphor. And the idea here was, in fact, to understand where people are at the current moment and make sure that everything that we're doing, the policies, the programs, the processes we have are ones that are welcoming and inclusive. Because again, sometimes it's often missed, but in the DEI and racial equity plans, a significant issue is making people feel relevant and included in the program. I want to just take a moment to just highlight one particular program that speaks to many of these issues. And this is a program that we've been very proud of. It's one that's been going on for more than 10 years now, which is called NIHS Scholars Connect program. And so this is administered through the Office of Scientific Education and Diversity. And what we've been able to do in this program over these 10 years is to really bring in more than, let's see if I can get this pointed to work, more than 82 students over the years, and 76 of those have completed. In the pie chart, you can see that this program, I think, has been an outstanding success. It's allowed us to really provide opportunities for a broad spectrum of individuals to move on to careers and choices that they wanted to make. And for more information, there's a URL shown at the bottom here. And this really represents a part of our strategic plan, which is a commitment to diversifying the environmental health sciences. So the third action is really trying to identify practices and processes that and policies that we can use to look at that are impact racial and ethnic equity. And these include training program opportunities. Within our Division of Intramural program, we've had for a number of years a program that promotes the recruitment of diverse individuals. And this is diverse individuals in its broadest terms. This is both racial, ethnic, social economic, previous attendance at college, any individual who has been or is part of a group that is generally underserved and under seen in the process of science are eligible. And so by doing this, we've been able to bring a number of students who might not have had the opportunities otherwise to work in our laboratories and really been quite successful. And we've been trying very much as we go through the hiring process to make sure that we use really inclusive selection criteria. making sure that people are eligible for our programs, again, have most of the opportunities present. And then finally, we're also looking very much at mentoring, because we think that's a critically important feature in how we proceed by looking at various training courses that provide postdoctoral fellows at NIEHS the opportunity to be better informed about DEIA, the idea being that as they then move on to their careers, be they in academic, government, or industry, they bring an expertise and a training and exposure that they will carry with them as they become future leaders in these fields. And then we've really been trying to try to understand how do we work as an institute. And so we had the idea to create what we've called a DEIA Council. And this is a group, again, self-formed, self-assembled, that is open to everyone at the institute, which allows a vehicle for both discussion and proposals, and an attempt to really keep leadership and supervisors and our all staff fully engaged and accountable for what we do. And so we're able to have a team now that represents the spectrum from senior leadership to postbacks and early NIHS employees to contribute in this DEI effort. And then one of the questions that, of course, is trying to understand this process is one needs data. And so we have been working with our Fellows Office to create a data dashboard so we can understand something about what our workforce looks like and what opportunities there may be or areas that we perhaps have missed. Doing these activities, of course, reveal that there are a number of challenges. One of the first, of course, was convincing people to devote their time to this process. As I mentioned, it's a voluntary effort. And also, we've been really happy with the effort and also the support that we're receiving from leadership and supervisory members of our staff for allowing people to participate. Getting relevant training, which we've engaged in, and again, the Institute has shown support by providing contracts for training in these areas, and then trying to gain access to demographic data. And then part of the first REAP was establishing benchmarks and metrics. And of course, as always at NIH, there's an idea that what you need today, you should ask for today, as opposed to allowing any significant lead time or planning. So there's been, of course, a time pressure to get this done. But throughout all, we've been really, I think, really fortunate to have gained very dedicated staff to do that. So as we move forward, there are a number of things we've identified, which is to take advantage that, again, another related initiative that came out of Unite is a revamping of the NIH Director Awards to make them more inclusive and to make sure that we had greater participation. What was observed is that when we looked at the people who received NIH and NIHS Directors Awards, it really skewed toward higher graded, more senior level individuals. And so we wanted to create a set of awards that would be more broadly dispersed across our entire workforce. And so I think we're seeing the first year of that, and we've had a number of successful applicants for that. Again, developing the REAL and the REAP process is an ongoing activity, as I'll emphasize in the slide in a moment. And so this is not something we arrived and we're done, but it's a continually learning process. We also, as I mentioned, acquiring data is really critical. And so developing a collaborative relationship with the NIH Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which is the gatekeeper, the holder for all NIH demographic information, has been challenged. And then something which we need, and we're really, again, I think I'm really sort of proud to say, is that through the support of Dr. Wojcik and our senior leadership team, we have created the infrastructure for an office that is devoted to promoting DEIA at NIHS. And this will be a 4-person office that will have a very senior level person that we are in the midst of recruiting at this time. And he or she will have deputies who will then focus on the various divisions and activities at the NIHS. And so this will address the issue that I raised earlier, which is that we have all done this as part of things that are traditionally outside of our jobs, outside of what are in our PMAPs. While we continue and expect engagement in all levels, we are devoting specific resources to make sure that this happens. because it's very clear that if there's something that NIEHS and NIH values, it funds. We fund research that we think is exciting, and we put money behind it. And if we think DIA is important, we also put resources and funds behind it. This is, as I mentioned, an ongoing process, and so the REAP is an annual requirement that is at each IC, and it has a process by which we can gain contributions, feedback, information from other ICs and NIH, work with our staff, work with our leadership to improve this. So what I've shown you is the first iteration. We are in the process of revising and hopefully improving the plan that we have in order that we can really achieve the success we want. And so I'll end by just acknowledging again some of the individuals shown here who are involved both in the previous and the current ongoing version, and recognize the support from the Office of the Director, particularly Mary Jacobson, Serena Silvera in my office, Office of Management led by Jay Mathis, Erica Reed and Office of Science, Education and Diversity, the entire NIHS senior leadership team, and then contractors, Small World and Powertrain. And then we've always had an engagement, and we've been really heavily supported by Ed Kang, the Office of Management and Workforce Planning and Development. And so working with individuals are named here, most of which I called out are previously, we've been able to, I think, create what we hope will be an effective plan as we try to move forward to really make progress in this area. And with that, I'll stop and be happy to take any questions you might have.
And Karen Vasquez is up first in the queue for questions. Karen.
Yeah, Trevor, I can't see you on the screen now. Oh, you're there. Hi, Trevor. Trevor, that was really great. Thank you for that really clear and concise presentation of a lot of work and effort. What I really like about what you're doing is that you're actually implementing. And, you know, you'll hear from our group later this afternoon, we were more just we're the thought process, we don't implement, right? We're just providing advice to all of you, largely on extramural sort of issues, but also intramural. But I think one thing that I think we're all aware of is, you know, we can try to be mindful and intentional in hiring and be more diverse workforce and so on. But I think really change comes from a culture, right? A culture that you build. And I think what you're doing is just really fantastic in that regard, because the more people that you engage in it, your volunteers and your staff and the leadership being supportive, I think the more that you engage in things, and I love all of your training programs and your weekly meetings, I think just the more that you do something, it just becomes part of then your thought process and culture. And I think really overall, that's the key. So I really appreciate what you're doing, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts on our report later on today.
Well, thank you very much for that, Karen. And again, I stand here, but I represent a broad activity of many of my colleagues who put in a lot of hours in this, because we agree with you, which is we think we really want to have this be a cultural change and something that, rather than just a set of policy or directives, but something that people can embrace, understand, accept, and really are committed to. And again, we look forward to the work, and the things I think identified as one of the targets here. You know, engaging with stakeholders in a group such as the council and this working group, I think, is really critical for us to understand the broad process. So thank you.
Jenny.
Thanks for the presentation, and clearly lots of focus on this issue, which is awesome. So my comment is, and maybe I'm off base or I don't quite understand, but looking at your slides and what you presented, it seems like some of your advisory groups or assistance that you're getting are from historically Black colleges and universities, and which is great, but there's other groups out there. So I was wondering if you have any intention of talking to folks at Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges, or at least Native American serving, and then Asian American folks, If you're focused on North Carolina, Pembroke is a good resource for tribal, people, folks. That I looked up, there's the HSIs here in North Carolina are all community colleges, but I'm sure they have some folks that would be really good at, like bringing those voices. So I was just wondering if that's a possibility, because it does seem that there's a little bit of a, focus on more African American groups than other underrepresented groups.
So and part of the reason I sort of use the introduction at the beginning was to sort of remind her that the creation of this program, came out of a sort of specific set of activities and results. But I think hopefully, as you saw in the presentation, is that we have really had that grow into a fully embracing DIA in broad concepts. And while a number of the focus, in fact, as I mentioned, the 19 HBCUs, I think, and MSIs, I think it was on the slide there, because there is actually the recognition, yes, that in addition to the HBCUs, which have a prominent place in North Carolina and in this area, we do have a number of other institutions. And so the outreach that going is not limited to HBCUs, but really reflecting the broader spectrum of MSI and Hispanic serving institutions across the area.
Right. So I guess one suggestion is to maybe list that, because I'm sensitive. So as a Native American person, we're often other. And that's what it kind of came across. So, and then the other group is folks with disabilities, to really try and look at that underrepresented group, and especially the sciences kind of thing. So anyway, just a suggestion.
No, thank you. Those again, this, because the origin and the mandate for this plan was racial and ethnic equity. That was the focus. But as I think I tried to use, and we've tried to use throughout the various goals and activities, we've really embraced those as DIA goals are, and of course the A in DIA is accessibility, and so that is definitely part of our concerns and our efforts. And not to call out, but of course we have individuals with disabilities on our replanning process, and that we've just not identified people by groupings, if you will.
And I might, if I can put Christy Pettibone on the spot, I know when we did our engagement activities with when we did our listening sessions, we were very intentional about including other minority serving institutions in those conversations. So it was not limited to the HBCUs as well. So I don't know, Christy, if you want to comment on that.
I don't think Christy was able to be on this morning, but yes, that's correct.
Daryl, you're next.
Thank you very much, Trevor. That was great. But let me just say a word about lessons learned within the context of the contemporary lexicon for inclusive futures, right? So this is from the perspective of someone in a red state, a little bit different state versus federal, but one of the things that we found was that trainings, so we call them sharing sessions, right? There was quite a bit of pushback in terms of people just generally, training what, and so might want to think about that a little bit. And certainly the introspection comes into play, as we were talking about a little earlier. So just having, in terms of your educational battery of resources, you want to make sure that it's comprehensive, such that everyone comes to this from a different place, a different perspective, and you have to be able to meet people where they are. And now, when you say staff, you aren't referring to just staff at NIEHS, are you? It's everyone, right?
So when we're referring to staff, we're just this plan is about the NIHS Workforce.
Right. So it's actually staff. What about us? What about people who aren't? The workforce, that includes you.
It includes me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it includes by workforce and staff. All leadership is part of staff as well. People who are outside of, if you will, NIH employees, for example, what we call the extramural ecosystem, if you will, those are addressed. And again, I hope if I can just back up a slide here, for example. We will have one of our deputy offices focus on the external, which would be the non-NIH staff and members dealing with, and this would be receptive, for example, to some of the suggestions coming from the working group that Dr. Vasquez is heading. And also, thinking back to the first slide about Unite, there are two committees, the N and E committees, that have focus on things around the system outside of NIH. And so, for example, I think we'll hear next from Dr. Diaz-Rue on the first program. This is a common fund program that was engaged with Unite E and N committees in terms of developing resources in the academic and outside of NIH for that process. So, but again, the REAP is really about the internal NIH workforce.
Great. And one last point would be the concept of shared values underneath that umbrella. And so with shared values, everyone, the sense of belonging. And so we've had to pivot to, because let's face it, everyone, the most innate instinct human being is just to belong to something. And so,
Yeah, no, and I take your points, and to add to that, I think yes, the part of our thinking about the I in this, the inclusiveness, is that it would hopefully speak to the belonging, and also we have, and I didn't show them, but I think Dr. Wojcik has shown on previous occasions are the values that NIHS has embraced, and among those include things relating to inclusiveness, belonging, and supporting our development along those ways. And again, as you mentioned, thinking about language is really important, and part of the effort Deanna mentioned is in bringing in some of the consultants is the recognition that most of us are not subject matter experts in this area, and so taking advantage of the work, the academic intellectual work in the area, new developments and new ways of approaching things, but this is really critically important for our development. And to us, that's when we say educate, that's the area, the space that we're trying to occupy there. Thank you.
Trevor, you're next.
Hi, this is Trevor. This is quite a remarkable presentation in terms of all that you're trying to do, especially on the intramural side. Listening to the comments that Johnny made was resonated with myself also, in that I'm wondering if the name of this program is correct. I think you started with the issue of racial and ethnic equity plan, but it's very clear that this is morphing into something to take into other diverse groups. And I think, a lot can be said in a name and a name only. And you may want to think that maybe this is version 1, but then have a version 2 that is more inclusive for those other diverse groups. That's a comment for you to think about. The other thing is that I think one of the big items on the room is data. You obviously have to have metrics of success, so it's very important to know where you're starting from. What proportion of your workforce is actually diverse at all levels, and also to think about a term that we've used in the P30 centers is spheres of influence. And so you are actually thinking about the spheres of influence that you can put into place to increase diversity. So diversity also goes actually into the membership of the council. Is it diverse enough, right? And other extramural scientists that you bring in to actually determine the success of your programs, is that diverse enough? So there's some things to think about.
Thank you, Trevor. I don't often say that, but you make some good points. And again, I think part, as I mentioned in providing the introduction, is that this was a specific and is a specific requirement for NIH leadership in terms of putting together this plan. It has, as NIH and other parts of the government have evolved with the new executive orders that have come from the president on DEIA, we have really embraced those quite enthusiastically and continue to expand those. And speaking with respect to the spheres of influence, that's an idea that's captured in part of the real process, and recognizing that how we define leaders is often hierarchical, but leadership can also come through the people that actually have more significant influence, spheres of influence, and that not necessarily always reflected in the hierarchy. And that's part of the approach we've taken to making sure that we have had as broad and a diverse group of individuals participate in this process, recognizing that the most influential person on these ideas may not necessarily be someone in senior leadership. And so I take the points you mentioned. I think those are things that we are considering and are utilizing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Irva, you're next.
Yeah, very much appreciate hearing how things have developed over time. I'm thinking back to some of the first conversations we had on council and some of the early presentations about Unite and so forth. I actually just have two questions. One is, and I remember one of the presentations we heard was from Hannah Valentine, who was heading up sort of DEI, I guess, for all of NIH, from the Office of Director for a number of years. And at the time, that was actually the end of her cycle in that position. But she called out NIHS as being a bit ahead of the pack in terms of the ICs and across NIH. And I'm wondering whether there's a mechanism for communicating and influencing the other ICs to be doing more than they seem to be, because I think you have a model that and that you've already been implementing, as one of the other council members mentioned. So that's my first question. The second one I think is probably pretty straightforward. I didn't hear a whole lot about the extramural program, and I presume that we're going to hear about that from Karen, and I'm later this afternoon or later today.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you, Irva. So starting in reverse. So yes, of course, as I mentioned, this process and the REAP is focused on the NIH workforce. I think the impact in the way that we will see that in the extramural world is the fact that our Division of Extramural and Training program have been extremely busy, active, and at the forefront of trying to understand and approach these questions. And again, I think you see, as you had in the presentation from Dr. Burns yesterday, the way some of these ideas are coming into the general review process and how we're organizing that going forward. Thank you for I think for the compliment about our institute and what we've been doing. Yes, we do. We're not shy with our NIH colleagues about what we are able to try to do, and we have, through I think activities of individuals like Ms. Mathis and Dr. Zeldin, who serve on the NIH Equity Committee. One that I served on previously, and then the work that we do in the Unite, and the members are involved in that process, and also serving on the NIH DEIA strategic plan. Those kinds of things allow us to provide the example of what we're trying to do, and recognize that we still have a lot to do. But again, I think we're fortunate in that we have a number of individuals at the Institute who, over many years, going back to really to Dr. Olden when he was the director, who brought put that issues about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility on the radar for our institute. And so we're just hopefully trying to maintain those efforts and going forward.
Yeah, and I it seems like one of the things maybe to emphasize in your communications with the other ICs is this business of having an office dedicated to this, that it's, for other people, it might seem extraneous to their job, although it's not. But to have people whose job it is, to monitor and promote this is really important and forward thinking and in terms of sustainability, I think.
Right. So, thank you. I completely agree. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say that this is actually an approach that has been adopted across the NIH in terms of going this route. And again, we've been working with our colleagues to make it happen. So it is as part of the commitment that the IC directors have made to our promoting DEIA is the recognition that there's a need to provide resources and creating similar such offices across the various ICs. So we expect that that will be a shared feature going forward across all the ICs.
Great to hear. Thank you.
So we'll pause for a second. There are no more hands raised. I just want to give people an opportunity if there are other questions or comments for Trevor. We have some time still before we have to get to our next speaker. Otherwise, Anna, if you are ready, we can move ahead with yours. Karen.
Yeah, let me just, I would just add, in the chat, there were comments about including other groups, including LGBTQ. And also because we're talking about equity, inclusion, many things, you'll hear some comments in our report about women in science, particularly in leadership positions, which they're sorely underrepresented, and also working moms and working dads. So we have a large group of people. It's inclusion, right? So I think it's everyone, and there are a lot of people that I think are just not on equal grounds, regardless of their race, gender, etc. So I think, we just keep the whole, inclusion of everyone who might be in a position to need additional thought, right, in the workforce. So a great job, Trevor, again, thank you.
Thank you very much. I will add, since you mentioned the last point, is that one of the things that we're really happy with is that the DEIA Council that I mentioned at the end has greater than 60 members on that. And the reason I mention that number is that we have just over 600 federal employees. So which means that we have a representative group that's about 10% of our staff. And so if you think about how do you understand what an organization's doing, having a group that comprises about 10% of that staff, I think is a really terrific way to try to make sure that all of the various issues that you've mentioned, Karen, for example, this is Pride Month, June, and NIHS is very happy and a very strong supporter of those processes. And certainly the issue of women in leadership is one that we take very seriously and has been, again, part of the larger discussion. The presentation was long enough without adding even more things, but I really appreciate people bringing those to attention. So, David, I think I'll stop there and go on to next.
Yeah, thank you very much, Trevor. And I'll, on the LGBTQ plus front, I will also highlight that we actually have approval and are flying a pride flag on our flagpole out front, so you can take a snapshot of that when you go out. I think it's remarkable that we're able to do that. Our next couple presentations, our grantee presentations for this council, and Trevor alluded to this, are really highlighting an activity that's coming out of the Unite-N committee that is a common fund program called the FIRST program, which is Faculty Institutional Recruitment for Sustainable Transformation. This is really enforcing that idea that building a more diverse and inclusive research team improves the research that you do, and that requires a sustained investment of significant resources, not just in recruitment, but in development and retention of faculty to engage in a highly collaborative research environment. So several of NIHS staff are actively engaged with the oversight of the FIRST program, and we wanted to highlight two of the grantees of that are doing research that is very focused on environmental exposure and environmental health. So the first of those is the Drexel FIRST Center. That's led by Dr. Ana Diaz-Roux, who is the dean of the Dornsife School of Public Health at Drexel, and is really a well-established leader in the field of environmental health. And I'll go ahead and introduce our second speaker as well, who is Dr. Mark Reed from San Diego State University, who is the co-PI of their FIRST Center. And so I will turn it over to I think Anna's going to go first, maybe be a little bit of tag team. I think each of them is going to speak for about 20 minutes, and we'll have about 20 minutes for discussion at the end of this presentation as well. So Anna?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm sorry I can't join in person, so I believe you can see my slides, correct? Yes?
Yes, we can.
So, yes, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about this very exciting and novel program that we are very fortunate to be part of at Drexel University. So our program is called Catalyzing Systemic Change at Drexel University to Support Diverse Faculty in Health Disparities Research. And Laura Gitlin and I are co-leads of this effort. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit the overall goals of the program, tell you how we're organized, review a little bit some of the specific aims and the activities that we have been engaged in, tell you a little bit about where we are, our progress to date, and also highlight a few lessons and challenges that are already emerging. So as was noted, this is a new initiative supported by the Common Fund that, quote, aims to enhance and maintain cultures of inclusive excellence in the biomedical research community. And it is justified by existing data and evidence showing that the diversity of investigators, particularly those funded through the competitive and R01 grants, is not where we would like it to be. And this is important to address, both from the perspective of science, the rigor of the science and the quality of science that we do, and also from the perspective of equity in general. So the program is focused on a number of elements, which I'll talk about in a moment, but has I would say as an overall theme, to really create cultures of inclusive excellence at research-intensive academic institutions. And so what does the term inclusive excellence mean? And this is the Common Fund definition, the one that was in the RFA that we all look to. So it refers to cultures that establish and sustain scientific environments that cultivate and benefit from a range of talent, and the
So, Anna, we're getting a little bit of bandwidth issues. You might want to turn your camera off and see if that helps us.
program seeks to facilitate. All right, let's see if this is better. Let me go back to is this a little better?
Yes, yes, we're getting you clearly now.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So I was referring to the definition of inclusive excellence, and the program seeks to have an impact on faculty development, retention, progression, and eventual promotion, as well as to develop inclusive environments that are sustainable. So quite an ambitious program, because as you can see, the goal is not only to recruit and support and facilitate the success of these scientists that we're recruiting, but also transform the institutions in which they work in a way that is sustainable. So this is a big job. And as you can see at the bottom, NIH expects its efforts to lead to recruitment and retention of talented researchers from all groups, to improve the quality of the training environment, to balance and broaden the perspective in setting research priorities, and to positively impact scientific discovery. So very ambitious and important goals. Our Drexel first, so I should mention that in the initial round of awards, 6 sites were funded. We were awarded in the first round. An additional set has been awarded a few months ago.
And we're losing Anna again, I'm sorry. Nathan, I don't know if there's anything we can do on our end to improve bandwidth.
No, there's not. If worst comes to worst, maybe she can call in separately.
Okay.
She can even hear us. I have to contact her.
So I might suggest actually that we jump ahead to Mark's presentation, and I'll email with Anna to see if we can get her to come on the phone line.
So it looks like I am all set here. Let me.
Yeah, if you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, great. Yep. Thank you. Let me go ahead and do that. Let's see. Well, you're not. Are you seeing the presentation or the presentation view?
We have the full screen presentation.
Great.
Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Reed. I am one of the MPIs on the SDSU FIRST grant, along with my colleague, Dr. Maria Luisa Zuniga. I'm the Associate Vice President for Research Operations and also a Professor of Public Health at San Diego State University. And I, like my colleague Anna at Drexel, are very fortunate to have been funded in the first round of the NIH FIRST program. And I don't think I could have coordinated things better with Anna, as she gave you a very good overview of the FIRST program, which I did not include in my presentation. So thank you very much, Anna. So today, I'd like to briefly provide, in terms of what I'm talking about, some of the context and unique features of SDSU that I think made for a very compelling story for our funding. I'll briefly go over just sort of a broad overview of what we're trying to do with our project, talk about our team, recruitment and hiring, tell you about our Fuerte cohort that we hired, our faculty development and programming core and what we're doing there, and some of the next steps, challenges, and what we've learned. And I apologize, I should have, we have an acronym for SDSU Fuerte. Fuerte, for those of you who know Spanish, means strong, and the acronym stands for Faculty Unified Toward Excellence in Research and Transformational Engagement. So Madi and I like to start our presentations with this quote, and I think it was, I think it was getting at what folks were talking about earlier before we came on. And this is from Fred Guterl, who is the executive editor of Scientific American. And the quote says, "Diversity, it turns out, goes to the heart of how we do research and innovation effectively." And that is something we really take to heart with Fuerte and at SDSU in terms of the success that we've had in the past with our research and what we see in the future. So just to give you a little bit of context about SDSU, we are in San Diego, as you know, and despite the fact that it looks sunny on my background, we've had cloudy days for like the last 3 weeks. I know you're all crying tears, right? But to give you some context about our campus, we really benefit, or the Fuerte program benefits from SDSU's highly diverse campus. We have about nearly 60% or over 60% of our students are students of color or from historically underrepresented backgrounds. We have a very vibrant binational rural environment. I will tell you in a few minutes here that we have 2 campuses that our Fuerte faculty are at. We have our Mesa campus, which is the campus in San Diego, and we have our Imperial Valley campus, which is about 100 miles east of San Diego, where our Mesa campus is. Despite our high diversity on campus, as you probably wouldn't be surprised, our faculty diversity does not look like our student diversity, which is one of the big reasons why NIH, obviously, and why SDSU wanted to be a part of this program to help begin or increase the diversification of our faculty. We've made some strides in the last 5 years, but there certainly is a lot of opportunity and room to grow. We do have a well-established DEIA priority at SDSU that's really come on in the last 5 years with our new president, Dr. Adela De La Torre, coming on board. And really, I think with her leadership has changed the environment significantly and for the better in terms of DEIA. We have a Center for Inclusive Excellence that is part of our Division of Student Affairs and Campus Diversity that put on a significant amount of programming to support all faculty as well as historically underrepresented faculty and faculty of color, women, LGBTQI plus groups, etc. SDSU is also a proud Hispanic serving institution and recently became an Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander serving institution. And we also have longstanding partnerships and joint doctoral programs with UC San Diego. And we're happy that our colleagues at UC San Diego were funded in the second round of the first program. So we foresee a lot of collaboration with our cohort faculty and with the PIs and researchers to continue with UCSD. So let me just briefly kind of go over our structure of the grant, the principal people involved. So as I said before, I'm an MPI on the grant. I'm also the administrative core director. We have 3 cores: administrative, faculty development, and evaluation. Dr. Madi Zuniga is our core lead and MPI for the faculty development core. And then Dr. Eileen Pippiton is a co-investigator and the core director for evaluation. We have some co-investigators in each of these cores: Dr. Jennifer Emazeki, who's actually the AVP for and oversees the Center for Inclusive Excellence. She's part of the administrative core. Dr. Joanna Brooks, who's our AVP for faculty advancement, is part of the faculty development core. And we have Dr. Lauren Wilner, who is part of the evaluation core. And I will say that we strategically reached out to our colleagues, Dr. Emazeki and Brooks, because of the roles that they hold at SDSU and their ability to help us institutionalize some of the things we want to do with Fuerte. Most of the work, as you know, would not get done if it weren't for these two individuals, Fiona Hurst, our project coordinator, and Mariano Lozano Soto, who is our evaluation assistant, to round out our team. So let me quickly go over our 4 major project goals and aims for Fuerte. The first is to create and tangibly support and institutionalize a sustainable culture of inclusive excellence that'll be transformational, not only to health sciences at FDSU, but to our surrounding community as well as the nation. Second aim is to design and implement a faculty cohort model for recruiting, hiring, faculty. We have recruited and hired 9 faculty through the first program, and I'll tell you a little more about those folks in a minute. Our faculty have all been selected because of their interest in health disparities, and we have 3 research cluster areas that fall into this grant. The third aim is to deploy a FDSU Fuerte faculty development plan that supports the research, professional development, community engagement, and hopefully accelerating research independence for success in academia and NIH-funded research. And the fourth is to evaluate everything, evaluate the impact along with the national evaluation that's happening through Morehouse School of Medicine. We are also doing a local evaluation looking at individual department, school, and university level faculty success, as well as the diversity, equity, and inclusion climate across the institution. So just an overview of our project. As I had mentioned before, we were funded to hire 9 early career faculty at FDSU Mesa and our Imperial Valley campuses. We were funded just about 2 years ago. We were also generously given 2 additional lines by our provost for 2 mid-career faculty to come on to be part of this cohort and really to serve as mentors and facilitators along with us as the administrative team for this project. And we've hired one of those 2 mid-career faculty, and we're hoping we have an offer out right now, and we're hoping to secure that last faculty member shortly. As I said before, we're implementing a comprehensive faculty development model, but probably more importantly, proximally, there are a lot of things that we're doing in terms of hiring, in terms of faculty development and support. But really, the goal here in the long term is to institutionalize what we've done with this faculty cohort model and with Fuerte. So some of the things that we are working on now, we've developed an inclusive excellence scorecard that looks at a multitude of metrics across the university to see how we're doing in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We're creating a recruitment and hiring toolkit that we will put out there for everyone to take a look at. And another area that we knew was an issue, but have seen more so with this last round of retention, tenure, and promotion, changes to RTP policy that really, I think, can facilitate and support our faculty of color in much better ways. And I think it goes without saying that many institutions have similar RTP policies to us. And I think that this is a national conversation in terms of how we evaluate faculty success and professional growth. So we have 3 focal areas of research for Fuerte. As was noted earlier, we have an environmental health focus. And our environmental health program in our School of Public Health is at our FDSU Imperial Valley site, which is a rural agricultural area of California that has a lot of human capital and social capital, but unfortunately has a lot of environmental risks and impact on the community that lives in the Imperial Valley, which is overwhelmingly Hispanic and Latinx, and one of the counties in California that has the highest rates of unemployment, unfortunately. But we feel that these faculty out there will be doing amazing things with the community, and that's sort of why we wanted to develop the environmental health area there. We also have a focal area on obesity, physical activity, and nutrition sciences, and then cancer and cancer disparities. So we've hired our 3 faculty already in environmental health, our early career faculty, and we have 1 mid-career faculty that's been hired. For our obesity, physical activity, and nutrition focal area, we've hired 3 early career faculty at our FDSU Mesa campus. And for cancer and cancer disparities, we've hired 3 early career faculty, and then we have an offer out for employment for a mid-career cancer biologist. And then, as I said before, we have both quantitative and qualitative research going on locally at the faculty, college, and institutional level. So let me talk a little bit about our recruitment and hiring, which we created essentially a 2-stage process to doing this, which we, as far as we know, have never done at SDSU. And I think our mantra with our approach really is that retention starts at outreach. Retention is a big part of Huerte and the NIH First program. So it really starts with your initial interactions with potential candidates. And, it goes without saying that, getting back to people in a timely way, updating them about the process, making sure that folks that were not selected are given letters that, explain that fact. I mean, these are all things that I've experienced through my career when applying for jobs. You apply for a job, sometimes you don't get it, and there's like a black hole. You're wondering, did I get it? Did I get it? We have tried not to do those kinds of things. So as I noted, we have 2 phases to our recruitment and hiring. The first phase was outreach and recruitment. We were very intentional about putting together a diverse in terms of gender, diverse in terms of ethnic and racial background, diverse in terms of discipline. We put together a 10-person committee that were tasked specifically with drafting position announcements, as well as leveraging professional networks to get the word out about these positions. We did market these positions in the Chronicle, as many people do, but we also went to other venues that were focused specifically on researchers and scientists of color. We used this one organization called minoritypostdocs.org that I highly, highly recommend as a source of recruitment. It is a wealth of information, and I can talk offline for those of you who might be interested in that organization, as well as things like the National Hispanic Science Network, social media, etc. We had a very specific recruitment plan, as well as very specific selection criteria from the outset of our hiring. So I do want to note here, just briefly, that typically, as is in many universities, faculty lines are typically allocated to a department or a college or a school. With this particular recruitment, we set a very wide net. We were interested in potential faculty who did research in those focal areas that I had mentioned earlier, who were very much focused on health disparities research. So we were really, with the exception, I think, of our College of Business, every college was engaged at SDSU: sciences, health and human services, professional studies, arts and letters, engineering, and of course our Imperial Valley campus. We also had significant buy-in from faculty, staff, and administrators. I will tell you, we were funded, as I said before, and I still remember this date, and it's important, as you'll see. We were funded on the 21st of September and mobilized a huge group of people on campus to help us with this big lift to start the recruitment process in the fall of 21. And we were able to hire 8 of our 9 early career faculty in our first year of recruitment. And then this year we're hiring hopefully the final 2. So the second phase is the hire and selection phase. For this, we actually had 3 separate hiring committees that, again, were composed of diverse members of our faculty from 5 colleges, because, again, we didn't know who we were going to get in terms of applying for these positions. The hiring and selection committees were actively trained in DEIA hiring practices, specifically implicit bias training, as well as equity-minded hiring training. We had 1 committee for each of our focal research clusters. As I said before, they came from 5 colleges in SDSU Imperial Valley. Each hiring committee had 7 tenure track faculty members, which included an inclusion representative, which is an individual who is there to ensure that bias isn't creeping into the selection process. That person, and I was one of them for one of the committees, gets extensive training on how to manage those kinds of conversations in the context of a hiring committee. We also elected to have a student representative and a community advisory member on each of the committees. These folks, per our policies on campus, could not vote, but I will tell you, having been part of this process, our community member and student member for our environmental health committee provided tons of support and really helped with this process. And so, I think that it worked very well for our program. We designed, as I said before, candidate evaluation rubrics, selection criteria, standard interview questions for each stage of the process. So the initial initial review of CVs and applications, our short list of candidates, and then for the final selection, we standardized everything. All candidates were required per university policy to provide a diversity statement. However, in addition to the diversity statement, the candidates all have to meet 2 of 8 Building on Inclusive Excellence criteria. And the Building on Inclusive Excellence criteria essentially map onto a candidate's dedication and previous work with diverse students, diverse faculty, diverse community members in the areas of research, teaching, and service. So we had, really built into this hiring process a very intentional focus on DEIA and inclusive excellence. So let me just briefly tell you who we were able to very fortunately secure in our 2 rounds of recruitment and hiring. So these are the faculty in the obesity, physical activity, and nutrition focal area. Dr. Benjamin Aceves, who's in the School of Public Health, Dr. Jessica McCurley, who's in psychology, and Dr. Adiana Stickle, who is also in psychology. Our environmental health faculty that are at SDSU Imperial Valley, the 3 early career faculty are Dr. Kai-Chung Cheng, who is in, as I said before, Imperial Valley in the School of Public Health, Dr. Linda Lara Jacobo, who's also at Imperial Valley in the School of Public Health, and Dr. Devrin Kaya, who just signed on this year and was recruited and will start next fall. And our mid-career faculty for the environmental health focal area is Dr. Miguel Zavala, an associate professor who is also in Imperial Valley in the School of Public Health. And rounding out our candidates are our early career faculty in cancer and cancer disparities, Nicolas Lopez Galvez, Corinne McDaniels Davidson, and Teresa Monkinen, all assistant professors, 2 of whom in the School of Public Health and 1 in the Department of Biology. And as I noted earlier, we have an offer out to a mid-career faculty in cancer biology and hope to have that candidate secured shortly to start in the fall. So let me touch on, as I'm sort of running out of time here, our faculty development programming and support for Fuerte. Generally what we're trying to do with this program is to address barriers that can undermine the success of historically excluded researchers. And that includes mentoring teams mapping a successful research trajectory, really a faculty-centered approach to professional development, really going where the faculty are in terms of what they need in their professional development, because there is a lot of variability when faculty come on. Building community is a big part of our program, navigating the RTP process as well as the sponsored research office and process at SDSU. And so this makes up the faculty development model that we have for Fuerte. There are 4 areas that map directly onto the aims for the faculty development core. The first aim is establishing research independence. So part of this program is helping faculty to develop their research skills, develop self-efficacy, training them in grants personship, proposal writing, and providing opportunities for interdisciplinary team science collaboration. And our faculty have already, within and across departments, have started collaborating with each other in just the first year of them being at SDSU. The second aim has to do with thriving in the academy, and this is really helping our cohort to develop an IDP. We created a new IDP and have deployed that with their mentoring team, providing really ongoing coaching, professional development, as I said before, assisting with the RTP process, and addressing challenges frequently faced by underrepresented faculty. You know, the cultural taxation that goes on with women and faculty of color in terms of committee work, student mentoring, et cetera, that is baked into this development model. The third aim is augmenting multi-perspective mentoring. So we have mentoring teams that are comprised of a peer mentor, a senior mentor, and then a sponsor. These mentoring teams meet regularly, and we're also formalizing a Mentoring the Mentor program that we hope to roll out next year. And then lastly, the fourth aim, and really this is something that we are doing all the time in various ways, but promoting community. So really offering and fostering a sense of belonging to our cohort, building an inclusive community of faculty partners, not only internally, but externally from the university, and trying to foster satisfaction and support among our cohort. So just to kind of go over quickly our first year programs and support that we've provided for our Fuerte faculty. Before they even came, we asked all of them to submit a self-appraisal to really, as I said before, see where the faculty are at and try to meet them where they were at in terms of their professional goals. We have an excellent, amazing group of faculty that we've hired, but there's a lot of variability in terms of people's skills, knowledge, and their strengths. And so we started this really to see what we could do to individualize our support of these faculty members. We had a comprehensive faculty onboarding orientation that was a day and a half in addition to the orientation on campus. Every month we have a program called Peers and Platicas. These are rotating topics that are suggested by our cohort. As I mentioned before, we have our mentoring team, the faculty individual development plan. All of our faculty participated in an NSF-funded program on campus called the SDSU Multi-Campus Transformation Equity Network. That particular program was designed to reduce isolation among women and faculty of color in STEM fields through this idea of action collaboratives or small groups that got together to socialize and discuss different topics that were relevant to the members. And there were several writing retreats that actually had childcare for the faculty all the faculty who were part of the MC10 network who went. We had a full day grant writing seminar that happened a few weeks ago. Our faculty have been prioritized for a program on campus that's called Grant Research and Enterprise Writing. It's essentially it's a grant writing program, but not just focused on the writing part, but how to build relationships with program officers, how to communicate your ideas to those folks and to people who are in positions to help fund you. And then lastly, they're really, sort of on a weekly, daily basis, sometimes the support of our faculty in navigating SDSU and the large bureaucracy that large institutions have, for better or for worse. So let me just kind of go over some of our next steps for the future years. As I had mentioned before, we have an Inclusive Excellence Scorecard. We've collected baseline data, and we will be monitoring those same metrics over the next 4 years. And what we would like to do is institutionalize this across the university after the grant period ends. I had mentioned the recruitment and hiring toolkit, ongoing support of continued institutional change, particularly around RTP policy and how things like mentoring, community-based research feed into RTP and tenure, as well as ideas around having inclusion representatives on RTP committees, as well as mandatory anti-bias training for anyone who is serving on an RTP committee. And then we will be onboarding Dr. Devrin Kaya this fall, as well as hopefully a new cancer biologist. I think we've had a lot of success in the first 2 years of this grant. There are many things that we need to do, and there have been so many lessons learned. But rather than going through all of them, I think the 3 biggest lessons I think have to do with learning that faculty are all coming from different places, and the support and professional development that you provide really needs to be tailored to folks. The second thing we learned, we had big plans initially for lots of programming and training, and when our faculty saw all the programs we had for them, we had a minor revolt. They all said, no, this is too much, and we agreed. And so, we made some changes midway. So I think flexibility and being responsive to faculty needs are really important. And the third thing that we've learned is that there just is so much to learn as a faculty member when you come on to a university. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and you sort of forget all of those details that go into managing grants, that go into submitting grants, that go into managing startups, those kinds of things. And we kind of take them, I think we take it for granted once we've been in academia for a while of how all of that works. And certainly we need to do a better job, not just, we are trying with our Fuerte faculty cohort, but I think we need to do a better job across the board when faculty come on at SDSU. So fortunately in my role, I can help, I think, create some programming around that so that we can take the lessons that we've learned to change the institution in a positive way. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate being able to talk about our program.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was great. So I think we'll take a couple very quick questions, but I think we want to have Anna's presentation and then come back for some larger discussion on both of these. So I know, Maria, you had something burning, and Karen, I see you have your hand up as well.
Just briefly, Mark, I wanted to express my admiration and also jealousy as a native Californian who's been in North Carolina now for 20 years. And being at the University of North Carolina, where our Board of Governors now has stated that any discussion of diversity in hiring or with your employees constitutes prohibited compelled speech, which really limits what we can do in terms of diversity in hiring and recruitment. And in fact, I just wanted to note that the School of Medicine and School of Social Work at UNC had proposed a collaboration on a social justice curriculum that the University Counsel's Office said would run afoul of that policy. So I just wanted to note that. I think you guys have done an amazing job, and just noting that if you're in a state where you have these types of prohibitions and cabins on free speech and what you can do, it's quite difficult as an institution to incorporate some of these diversity goals. So just wanted to note that.
Thank you for making that point, Maria. That's really important. Karen, and then Phil.
Okay, yeah, Mark, what a tour de force. I can't believe how many people you've hired. I noticed that you mentioned the National Hispanic Science Network. And for those people who are maybe not as familiar, it seems to be an amazing, I mean, I'm not a member, but I just recently hired a faculty member in our department he has received so many awards throughout his career. They have so many training awards, travel awards. It's amazing. And actually, his name is Luis Natividad. He's actually the chairman of the Early Career Leadership Committee in that network. And I think that this is an incredible resource for him, for everyone that can be part of that. And I wonder if you know of any other types of, for other minority groups, that if there are other sort of societies or networks like this, because I think it's just been incredibly valuable for him.
Yeah, actually, I have a whole list, and I had it. I didn't want to put it in the presentation, but certainly I can send it to maybe Liz McNair.
That would be great. That would be
yeah.
really
I can send. We had essentially, it's not really a database, just a spreadsheet of all of the identity-focused professional groups
that would be wonderful. If you could
that
send
we
them.
leveraged and sent these job announcements out. So I'll send those along so they can be shared with everybody.
Thank you. And one quick question. I noticed, we also, for several years now, we require an included diversity statement in hiring faculty, but we don't really know how to evaluate it. Do you have a good suggestion, or how did you sort of employ that? Right. So we have them, we read them, but we don't know really how to evaluate them.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something else I can provide. We have the Building on Inclusive Excellence program or requirements, those criteria, there is a specific rubric that is tied to that program. So what we do is we ask candidates to write a diversity statement, but we provide direction around these criteria that we're looking for so that they can address them in the diversity statement. The criteria may also show up in a CV or in a teaching statement. It's a very thorough evaluation, but I can provide those that rubric as well in terms of how those criteria are operational.
Very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
No problem. No problem.
Phil.
Yeah, Mark, first of all, as someone said, tour de force, I couldn't agree more. It's a fabulous effort. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm actually also in San Diego right now, so I know about the clouds. The question was about, are these all tenure track appointments that you've made?
Yes, they all 11 of the early career and the 2 mid-career are all tenure track positions. So the funding for the first 2 years of the early career is provided by NIH through the first program, and then the deans of the colleges in which these individuals landed, as well as the provost. These are hard lines that will be carried forward after the second year.
I mean, it's an interesting model that of how you've constructed this. As you said, the lines are not within schools and departments, but they're within research areas essentially. But then ultimately they fall, as you indicated, into departments and which are variable. I'm just wondering what the forward plan is to sort of prepare these people for tenure with across the sort of diversity of situations where the policies and the tenure policies and procedures might be a little different within different parts of the university.
Yeah, that's a great question, Phil. So one of the things we did do once candidates made it to the interview, the short list, we asked them to identify, or actually I take that back. When candidates first applied, we asked them to identify departments or schools that they felt their skills and training would best fit. And by and large, those are I think almost with everyone, those are the departments that folks wound up, or schools that folks wound up being in. And so to address, I think that's an important question about the variability across colleges in terms of the RTP and department RTP requirements. At least for two of our colleges, Sciences and Health and Human Services, where the lion's share of the faculty are from, they're fairly similar policies. And Imperial Valley, the faculty that are out there have joint appointments. And so they also have an appointment with the School of Public Health. And so those policies, I'm not saying they're completely aligned, but that's part of the support that we'll be giving faculty. Also educating deans and senior faculty in these colleges about the important differences of our faculty coming in. But that is a great question. And I will tell you, it was to get all this to work, because they weren't being hired specifically as a line in the department, took a lot of work, but also a lot of trust among our colleagues to sort of hand this over from a department hiring committee to this much larger kind of thing. Does not happen, or has not happened.
Yeah, you actually made a very important point just then, which is really the ability of these programs to change academia and how we think about what it is we're doing. And I think that's really encouraging.
Thank you.
On that note, I think we should move on to Anna's presentation, to go back into Anna's presentation. So hopefully we have that queued back up. Anna?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. You can hear me okay now?
We can
right?
hear you okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm actually in Buenos Aires, where I'm visiting my parents, so apologies for the connection problem. So I'll be brief and avoid repeating things that Mark has already addressed. So I think I had already talked a little bit about the general aspects of the first program and how novel and ambitious it is. Getting specifically into our program, our goals are to recruit 12 diverse early career scientists, support their career development, which includes supporting them through promotion and tenure, but also their research development, so that they are successful in hopefully obtaining R01s or R01 equivalents by the end of their third year, which is quite a tall order. Also create sustainable institutional changes necessary to promote inclusive excellence at our institution. And last but not least, evaluate program outcomes at multiple levels, including the scientific impact of the first faculty on health disparities research itself. Create a collaborative structure that supports all this, that engages leaders across the university, and catalyze sustainable institutional change, as I noted. So we are, similarly to Mark's group, we are organized into cores, and each core has an overarching aim, an administrative core that has a sort of infrastructure and coordination function, a faculty development core that will develop and implement best practices at the department, college, university level for mentoring and supporting diverse early career faculty. The faculty development core, as I mentioned, also will have a special focus on research development, because these are research intensive early career faculty, and this is very, very important aspect of the program. And evaluate, it's a very complex evaluation, which is done on one hand by the individual programs and also coordinated by Morehouse. Evaluate the outputs and the successes of the program at multiple levels, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So our program, I won't get into the names because I don't think they're of interest to you, but our program is joint between the Dornsife School of Public Health and the College of Nursing and Health Professions. And we have a set of leaders for each core, supporting faculty, over 50 mentors who work in health disparities across the university, an internal advisory panel, which is very, very important because it's the way that we will be disseminating and implementing our recommendations and findings for the university, which includes other deans, vice provosts, and vice presidents at the university level, and a very distinguished set of external advisors, including actually a former director of NIHS, Ken Olden. We're very fortunate to have him on our external advisory panel. I won't dwell on this, but I do want to emphasize that, of course, we are grounded in a university context that supports inclusive excellence, including the university's anti-racism and diversity strategic plan components, various centers that we have at our school, the Ubuntu Center on Racism and Health, the Center on Black Culture, the Urban Health Collaborative, Age Well, a number of activities that we are really leveraging and bringing together as part of this program. Our overall theme is health equity, spanning population science, so etiology, to all the way to intervention. So we really believe in this whole, that we really need to span the whole range from etiologic description, etiologic research, but also intervention and policy. And we are grounded also in the NIMHD framework on health disparities that really talks about multiple levels and multiple domains. Within the overall theme of health equity, we have 3 areas of focus: aging, chronic disease, and environmental determinants. And we have already hired our 12 faculty. 9 started last fall, and we have 3 more that are starting next fall. And this is the distribution. And we used a Venn diagram because actually there's a lot of overlap in these faculty because they are very interdisciplinary. So although nominally 3 are assigned to our aging cluster, 6 to our chronic disease cluster, and 3 to our environmental determinants cluster, there's a lot of exchange and overlap, which we think is really exciting. The Faculty Development Core, briefly, it will support professional development and implement best practices for mentorship and sponsorship to support the career development of these faculty. So we're really trying to draw on evidence-based practices, support research development, again, clear path to submitting an R01 or R01 equivalent, and to build a community, a research and scientific community that is collaborative and supportive. This is an example of the various faculty development activities that we are in the process of implementing. It includes mentoring, but also professional development workshops, research development workshop, specific aims and grant reviews, grant writing, teams, consultancies, teaching support, networking events for the faculty to really interact with university leaders, including at the level of the president and the provost, and writing accountability groups. Our evaluation core is characterizing and tracking the various components because there are lots of moving pieces, and developing strategies in collaboration with the coordinating center to evaluate the impact on institutional outcomes, including climate, as well as implementation and adoption of the strategies and policies and practices that we develop. Our goal is that the university will adopt some of these for all of the faculty. Our evaluation core will also be evaluating the impact of the program on the hiring units themselves, so the School of Public Health and the College of Nursing and Health Professions, as well as the departments within them, including unit culture and climate, mentoring environment, and also evaluating the progress and success of the faculty themselves. And last but not least, also the scientific impact, because we believe this is also a very important aspect. So really the evaluation is complex and includes multiple levels, so tracking and evaluating impacts at the level of the faculty themselves, at the level of the hiring units, and at the level of the institution as a whole. And the domains that we are characterizing include research funding and productivity using traditional metrics, but also climate and inclusive culture using a series of surveys, institutional practices and policies tracking what we have now and how they change as a result of the program, and of course, scientific impact. A little bit about our achievements to date. Well, we're really excited that we have recruited the 12 faculty, and we developed a cohort hiring process that was, and a faculty orientation that was joint across both units. And those of you who are in academia know that it's often challenging to do things across units. That was initially agnostic as to what department the faculty member would be in. So we did a single search committee that interviewed applicants for all 12 positions. So it was quite a different model for us but very exciting. And in fact, we're very happy that the university is considering adopting aspects of our process for other cohort hires at the university level. For faculty development, we have implemented a very comprehensive program. As Mark said, we have to be careful that we don't overwhelm our faculty with too much programming. We have developed mentoring resources, a very deliberate process to match first faculty to mentors, a very intense research development program that is ongoing now. And we have 2 ongoing scientific development workshops that Laura Gitlin and I chair as PIs of the project, one on intervention development studies and another on population-based studies, where faculty present their specific aims, their ideas. We talk about all sorts of things related to grant submissions and grants development. And also eventually we'll talk about grants management, because as Mark said, there are all these details that to talk about and to learn. And often academic institutions are not well organized in communicating these things. So we hope lessons about how to communicate these things better will also emerge from this program. These are 12 faculty. They are really spectacular. I have no time to go into the details of all their backgrounds and their focus, research focus, but they are a really stellar group. They're super energetic, and they have already become agents of change at the institution. So it's really, really exciting. The cohort model creates a different kind of dynamic because it's 12 new assistant professors starting at the university. And so there's nothing better than that for highlighting what we do well and what we need to do better. In institutional culture change, this is another very important aspect of this program. I mentioned that we have implemented this new cross-unit cohort hiring approach, and we also delivered a very comprehensive set of recommendations to the university based on our experience with this hiring process. Recommendations to HR, recommendations regarding faculty searches, DEI training that the university offers, and also composition of search committees and mentors. And so our hope is that these recommendations will move forward. We've received in general very positive feedback. In fact, as dean, I recently received a notice from the provost about how we're going to manage requests for new faculty lines for next year. And I was very pleased to say that they referred to our first program in justifying some of the changes that they're going to make when new faculty lines are requested that have to do with promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, a program evaluation. We have launched our multi-level and mixed methods evaluation. This is a work in progress. It's very challenging and complex. And we have also implemented there's a lot of tracking and reporting that is ongoing as well. So to wrap up, I wanted to talk a little bit about challenges and lessons learned. And I think this will resonate with what Mark said a lot. I think really, balancing the demands on the first faculty we have to be very careful that we are not overwhelming them with programming and not really giving them the space and the time that they need to develop their ideas and advance their work. We're on a very fast timeline. Their expectation is that these faculty will obtain R01 or R01 equivalent funding by the end of their 3rd year. This is very, very ambitious. And so everyone's a little bit nervous about that, but we are, we're on it. The cohort has an evolving culture, and they are heterogeneous in terms of their prior experience. We have some cohort, they're all assistant professors tenure track, but some have very recently completed their PhDs, and others have been assistant professors already. So it's a very broad group. So we need to remember that and tailor the programming that we developed to address all of their needs. There are many institutional challenges and heterogeneities, as was noted earlier, heterogeneities across departments in workload for faculty, for example, is just one example. And I think this program makes visible those things, and in that sense has been very good because it has really motivated us to address some of those things while at the same time acknowledging that there will be some inevitable disciplinary differences that we have to be aware of. There are multiple dimensions of inclusive excellence that include from HR processes to how we support faculty, to research, to teaching. So this is really something that affects faculty life in many, many different ways in almost everything that a faculty member does. And this is something that we also have to keep in mind and be vigilant. And the evaluation will be very complex. And so we want to make sure that we're also tracking successes of the program that may not be captured by a traditional data collection approach, and that we want to be able to reflect back on and note and link back to the program. And my last slide is, being someone who has worked in environmental health a bit, and a big fan of environmental scientists and the importance of environmental sciences for public health. I'm very happy that environmental sciences is part of this effort, because of course, environmental sciences are critical to population health and health equity. Diversity in the research workforce is critical to solid science in environmental sciences. Old and new environmental health threats require new and diverse perspectives. So I think advancing the mission of environmental health really requires a diverse workforce. And of course, because there are very direct connections to policy and intervention, so they have very tangible impacts and very short term, in contrast to some other areas in public health. The links between environmental sciences and public health can be very quick in terms of the policy implications. And this is, I think, another reason why it's very important for environmental sciences to be an integral part of this first program. And so thank you. And I also want to give a special shout out to our NIHS science officer who was part of this program, Melissa Smar, who has been incredibly supportive and is engaged in many ways, meeting with the faculty and also guiding them and orienting them into how NIH can also support their work, connecting them to other institutes if that's where their work fits best, and other project officers. So thank you very much. I look forward to the questions, comments, conversation.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was fantastic. Daryl, see your hand up.
Oh. Thank you very much, Mark, Anna. Those were two excellent presentations. One of the things that we've sort of been faced with in terms of retention, attrition, we funded our own program. We competed for the initial offering, and we didn't get the grant, but so congratulations to you all. But they funded it anyway. So this was accommodations phase of COVID, somewhere along in there, right? In the syndemic. But we found that let's see, I think Mark had it in his presentation, the last bullet under faculty development, thriving, right? And so in order to address that, we found that we had to change our POA, patterns of administration, and APT documents to focus on impact, or else you're going to lose those people. I mean, we have evidence of that. And so do you have any ideas on that in terms of moving forward with this first cohort? Mark?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Mark, you may be muted.
I think you're muted, yeah.
I thought I clicked the microphone. Yes, we do. And unfortunately, a situation not having to do with Fuerte unfolded recently around retention, around a faculty member and the RTP process. The faculty member was granted tenure and promotion to associate professor, but had a real awful experience in some of the letters from some of the committees, unfortunately. And so last year, one of the things that we helped push through our Senate to change some of the RTP policy was the examination of faculty members' commitment to diversity as part of the RTP package. And we're asking candidates to create a diversity statement when they apply, and then we have not been, for lack of a better phrase, holding them to that once they come to the university, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're really looking into some of these issues around retention and promotion and tenure that have to do with really opening up the portfolio of things that we value as scholars and researchers and faculty, to not be so narrowly focused on numbers of publications, teaching evaluations, but really looking at community impact, which a lot of our faculty do. I mean, SDSU is a very much community engaged institution. We don't have that represented in those policies, and those are changes. I'm happy to say that we had some changes recently, but I think there are more changes that need to be done, and not just at SDSU.
Bill, thanks.
Yeah, I have more of a comment, but it could actually be a question as well. Thanks, Anna, too, for your presentation. So we've heard from a private university, we've heard from public university, and public universities are quite different. It's different being in California than we heard, for example, in North Carolina or where I am in Virginia, where you can't deny the political influence on. And I'm wondering whether you felt any of that and it's affected anything you've done within your programs. And it's really also a message to NIH that where these universities sit, where they're public, private, and in which state, influences the process, influences how you think about these programs, like it or not.
I mean, I'll just say that I think that's a very important point, and in fact, it has already come up in conversations among the sites. We had our first annual meeting just a few weeks ago, and there are some sites funded in states that are not, of course, welcoming of this kind of work, including a South Carolina site, for example. And so I think a very positive aspect of this new NIH initiative is that it is supporting this kind of work and making it visible and giving it credibility and value. And so I think it will be something that we'll have to talk about, but I'm sure this will emerge in further conversations across the first sites. It's a very important point.
I think your successes will drive those who are less fortunate in what they can do to be able to do more. So thank you.
Yeah.
Jenny.
So this is great. Both programs just so interesting and important. So my question is a little bit more in the weeds, and that's in terms of retention and asks of many underrepresented faculty to, as you said, serve on committees, be the poster child, those types of things. I mean, myself, I remember I had the provost tell me, you have to push back, you have to say no, and then 3 days later, she's asking me to serve on something because you'd be perfect. So helping them navigate that, I think I spent a lot of time with some of our new faculty just saying, you can say no to your chair, your dean, your provost. And then looking at changing systemically what is important, because if folks were brought in, right, to impact the system in terms of diversity, and yet a lot of those types of things are viewed as service, and one's told all the time, you're not going to get tenure for service. So how can you make that something important? Because the other thing is, when I do counsel like assistant professors, I mean, they want to do that kind of thing, but it all takes time. And so picking and choosing it can be difficult. So anyway, I guess my question is, I know part of these grants are to make a change on the system. Do you see having part of the tenure process being, this is important, you have impacted our institution, our region, we're gonna say you get a thumbs up or a kudo for that going up for tenure? Or, again, the old school is that's soft stuff. This is not really worth giving someone or considering it as part of their tenure. So just wondering if you've brought that into your processes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think you've put your finger on, I don't know if Mark agrees, but some tensions that we have to navigate in terms of, yes, these are incredible faculty that we see as change agents, but at the same time, we cannot burden them with that. and we really need to make sure that we support their own individual development and their choices and their career paths. So we talk a lot about these things with the first faculty and also among ourselves to make sure that we're giving clear guidance. Another challenge is also balancing the expectation that they will all have R01s in 3 years, which is a very tall order, and also creates a new set of dynamics and demands. And so I think we're all sort of figuring out what the best mixture is to really allow them to develop in their own individual ways, which is what we really want, right? And to make an impact on science in their way, in the way that they want to contribute. So what you're talking about is what we're figuring out and working on. It's very important.
Yeah, I agree, Anna. We've had the same discussions and have had some very honest and pointed conversations with department chairs and deans about service load of these folks. And to my point before about changing RTP policy, I mean, these are things that don't happen overnight, but certainly integrating how service impacts communities, not just service on campus, but the things that you're doing with your research, community engaged research. Those are the kinds of changes that we're hoping to make. And then also counseling, helping our Fuerte faculty with putting together their RTP packages and their evaluations and how to highlight these things in ways that may resonate better with a committee reviewing an RTP package than sometimes happens, without getting that kind of consultation and help and mentoring.
One other comment.
Sorry, I do want to very quickly add that maybe Mark mentioned this when I was off, but these faculty are special in that they have 75% protected research time. And this has to be respected by the departments. And so that also gives them a cushion of protection in terms of developing their research, that is guaranteed for them.
Yeah, that's great. One other, and you might already be doing this as far as your evaluation, and I know it's more of a long term, but how many of these folks then are recruiting, mentoring, and training underrepresented people? I mean, I see that in my own department. There is another Native American chemist, and within our college, we have so many more Native American students graduating as undergraduates and master's students and so forth. And I know it's because the two of us are there. So just that also is super, super impactful. So, but like I said, it's a little bit more long term, but trying to keep track of that.
Yeah, great point. Thank you.
Just wanted to thank you both for the presentations. I thought, and also I think this is a fantastic program. I wanted to ask you a question about what efforts and or information you might have about how these programs have been received among your faculty generally, in terms of this is obviously a new approach. It's changing the dynamic and the perspective, and so I'm curious as to the type of acceptance and or issues you had in that area.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'll keep it short. That's a great question. I will say initially I was a little not hesitant, but thought there might be some not blowback, but around how we hired people and created those committees. And then also, the obvious, at least at SDSU, the obvious inequities in terms of 75% research time for 5 years, the low service load, the great startup packages that were afforded to us through NIH and institutional matching. faculty talk with each other, and some of these things have already came up in terms of service, which I was, alluded to with these frank conversations with chairs. So I think in general, I happily can say that I haven't heard a lot of jealousy or anger or questioning. I think, many folks that I've been working with these faculty are embracing the program and have embraced our cohort and really are happy that SDSU and NIH are making this investment.
Yeah, I would just add that we did have, initially we had a lot of other assistant professors who said that they wanted to be part of the programming, that they wanted, because they saw everything we were developing for the first faculty. And we talked a lot about that, and we decided we had to provide it to them as well. So we created something called the bonus cohort, in addition to the first cohort, that also benefits from many of the faculty development activities. I think all of the faculty development activities. And to me, that's a success of the program, because now it means more people have access to it. So, so that's been interesting to see as well.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very, very informative.
And on that note, that very, very positive note that this is having tendrils that reach out to improve everything else, that's great news. We are a little bit behind schedule, so we're going into our lunch break right now. So what I propose is that we re-adjourn at 1 o'clock, and we'll have Sarah Tishkoff's presentation at that time.